is Chandra Sparks Splond, and she is an editor, speaker, and award-winning author and blogger. Her young adult novel, Make It Work, was named Alabama's Great Read 2017. Spin It Like That was chosen as a popular paperback for young adults by the Young Adult Library Services Association, YALSA, and the pledge was a YALSA Quick Pick for reluctant readers. Oh, that's a key word there, reluctant readers. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Black Pearls Magazine honored Splond as a Legends and Leaders for 2017 for her blog, Book of Splond, formerly known as Magic City Momma. Splond is the owner of West End Publishing, LLC, and Live Life Creations, a personalized gift and party boutique. In addition to working for Kensington Publishing as the consulting editor for Arabesque Romance, Splond has also done work for Random House, Moody Publishers, Kimani Press, formerly known as BET Books, and Hyperion. She has edited books for several New York Times, USA Today, and Essence best-selling authors. Splond has interviewed New York Times best-selling authors Karen Kingsbury, Kimberla Lawson Roby. Now, Kimberla, you all know because Kimberla has been on the show at least 3 times. Jerome Dickey, who I've been trying to get on the show and haven't been able to get him, and actress Meagan Good. She has also worked for Good Housekeeping, Black and Married with Kids, Brides, Noir, Weddingpages, Newsday, The Morning Call, and Romantic Times. Of all the titles she has held, Splond's most important remain Child of God, Wife, and Mommy. Splond graduated from Ramsey High School in Birmingham, Alabama, and the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa with a degree in journalism. She received her Master of Science in Education degree with a focus on instructional design and technology from Stanford University. And Splond is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Ski Wee and Ski Phi, and resides in Birmingham with her family. They are members of 45th Street Baptist Church. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Chandra Sparks Splond. Chandra, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you so much for rising early to join us. And I know you said this is your time of day that you rise anyway, so that's a good thing. Because some people, they're just not morning people. So when you have to do that early interview, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it's that early. But for those of us, and I'm not a morning person myself per se, but on Saturday mornings, I'm up early to do the show. So for those of us who, are accustomed to rising this early, it's not that bad. But for those who aren't, it could be a stretch. So I thank you for joining me. So, all right. And first off, AKA. All right. So we are brothers and sisters for sure because I'm A Phi A.
Okay. All right.
So we have the alpha in common. We have a few other things in common there. But clearly the love for reading is one of them. And it looks like that's kind of where you got your start. Matter of fact, I'm going to go to a letter to my reading friends. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but let's go all the way back to childhood. I mean, where did this whole reading passion or love come from? Reading, writing, that whole, because I saw in your bio and the word leaped out of me with reluctant readers. And because I work with children every day who are most of them reluctant readers, where did this all start for you?
I think I've had a love for reading for as long as I have been reading, honestly. There's just something about the written word that has always gotten me excited. My family tells stories now about how I always walked around with my nose in a book. So there was just the written word is and continues to be something that excites me. So I love sharing that excitement with others. As far as writing the books is concerned, I was about 14 years old when I was in school one day, and I found myself heading my paper for math class. And as I was heading my paper, I remember looking at my name and thinking, you know what, if I'm going to be an author one day, I need to learn how to write my name a little fancier than this because authors have to autograph books. And I think from there, maybe in the back of my mind up until that point, it had been an ideal being an author. But I think that moment in time is what sticks out for me at the moment where I truly made the decision. And it was also around that time, I would spend so much time in the libraries. One day I remember perusing the shelves, and there was a book by J. California Cooper. And I remember pulling the book because her name, she had a very cool name. And when I looked at the back of the book, there was a picture of her, and I realized that she was Black. And for me, it was a moment where I was like, wow, Black people actually write books. They don't have to just read them; they can actually write them. When I realized that, there was no turning back for me. But interestingly enough, I didn't actually write my first book until after I had my daughter in 2004. So I carried this dream around in my head and my heart for almost 20 some odd years. And then after I had my daughter in 2004, it occurred to me that I wanted to be the type of parent who, rather than telling my daughter she could do whatever she wanted to do, I wanted to be able to show her that she really could do whatever she wanted to do. So I challenged myself to write a book before she turned a year old. And I finished my first manuscript a month after her first birthday. And once I did that, I challenged myself to land a book deal before she turned 2. And I received the offer for my book, Spin It Like That, 2 months after her second birthday. So I guess they said the rest is history.
I mean, an interesting history it is in terms of, like you just described, in terms of writing it and then getting it published, or a book deal, if you will, but then moving on to do all the things that we just read about in your bio. In terms of working for the various publishing houses and owning your own publishing company and so forth and so on. How did we kind of like move from, I always love reading, I think I want to do something to be an example for my daughter, to now all of this? How did it all connect?
Well, interestingly enough, as I was getting ready to graduate from high school, as I said, I had already made the decision that I wanted to write books, but my mom asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And when I told her that I wanted to write books, she told me that writers didn't make any money. So I needed to find a career to fall back on. so I ended up majoring in journalism in college because that was the closest that I could get to writing. But once I started taking the journalism classes, I realized that the style of writing was boring to me. So my senior year of college, I ended up taking a class in copy editing. And I found that not only did I love copy editing, I was really good at it. So good, I was actually offered a job in New York. So I moved to New York to work for Newsday 2 weeks after I graduated from college. And from there, I moved there as part of a training program. So the program lasted for 2 years. The first year I was at Newsday in New York, and then the second year I moved to another paper in the Times Mirror group, which is what Newsday was a part of at the time. So I ended up in Allentown, Pennsylvania for actually 2 years because they ended up hiring me to work there after the training program was over. And while I was there, my father passed away. So I remember I actually went to the Bahamas, and I remember being there, and I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do with my life because I had always said that I wanted to write books. And I figured, well, if I'm not writing them, I at least want to do something where I'm working with books. And since I've been editing books, I was like, well, maybe I can be an editor, a book editor. But I had to figure out how to get from being in newspapers to getting in books. So the thought occurred to me that maybe I needed to work editing longer pieces of copy. So I was like, well, magazine seems like a good choice. So after I got back from the Bahamas, I started applying to all these magazine publishers. And it shocked me when Good Housekeeping, actually the copy chief at Good Housekeeping, reached out to me and was interested in interviewing me. So I went and did the interview. And she was like, well, we're thinking about hiring someone. We may or we may not. So I kind of continued doing what I was doing and got a job offer to work at the Wall Street Journal, which I wasn't interested in editing for finance. So I called Good Housekeeping back and told them I had an offer. And as a result of that, they ended up making me an offer to work for Good Housekeeping. So I stayed there for about 4.5 years. And, the name Good Housekeeping kind of opened doors. So it gave me, I guess, the clout to be able to start doing freelance book editing for publishers as well as individuals. And all of that just kind of ended up resulting in me moving into book editing full time. So And that's something that I still do to this day. I still work for different people, editing their manuscripts to help get them ready for publication.
Well, you know what the awesome thing about that is every one of those names you called off are big names. None of them were kind of like no names. I mean, when you said Newsday and you went to Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they went on down. I mean, all of them are big names. I mean, like when you walk in any supermarket, any store, Walmart, whatever, you're going to come across one of those names at some point or another.
Right. Yes, it's very clear to me that God's fingerprints have been all over my life from the very beginning, because there's no way that I could have done any of this on my own accord.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was just a little black girl growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, and to think that I went from there, to New York, working at one of the top papers there, this is clearly all God.
No, it is. And whenever you said your mom was telling you about the money making thing, you heard me go, oh, because, and you're a parent, I'm a parent. We know parents are well-meaning, and we as parents probably would give kind of sort of the same advice, maybe not knowing what we know, to our kids. But I laugh because my original major in high school, I said, no, whenever I graduated high school and I was going to go to college, I wanted to major in either music or English, because those were my two passions. And so my father said the exact same words to you, like, you know what? If you in music, unless you become like a Michael Jackson or some superstar, you're not going to make any money there. And English, if you're writing books, you're not going to make any money there. So do something that you can make money in. And I ultimately decided to major in business administration for undergrad. And I did ultimately work in corporate for 15 years, but my passion still was with education. So I ultimately still came back to teaching 15 years later and took on a whole different career path. But I'd laugh because that was the exact same words my father told me. You're not going to make any money at it.
Right.
And I know that because the parents are trying to set their kids up to be successful in life, to be able to make money, to survive, so forth and so on. I get it. But when all is said and done, we really do have to follow our passions.
Right.
Which
is what I tell my daughter now.
Right.
That, the money will come. Do what you love and the money will come. Correct.
And certainly that seems like it was your case. So whenever because you're writing young adult stories, why did you choose young adult or do you do more than young adult?
For the most part, I do young adult and middle grade. The book I released last August was actually my first venture into the adult market. Well, actually, it's called the new adult market because the books are for ages 18 to 30. I ended up doing young adult because, again, as a kid, I loved to read. And I would read all these stories, and it always used to bother me that I never saw book covers with people who looked like me. So I figured since I didn't see those book covers, those stories, that meant that I was supposed to be the one that told them. So, I mean, ever since then, I've had this desire to just write for young adults and to tell their stories.
Now, see, it's interesting because, again, we're dealing with, all right, let me ask this question before I even go there. Does your daughter like to read? Does she take on that love of reading as well?
She absolutely did. She's been reading since she was 4. And, I mean, she devours books. I would say she reads at least 5 or 6 books a month. And we're talking like 300 or 400 page books. So I guess that's one of the beauties of being a kid. You have time to read like that. But yeah, she absolutely loves to read.
Absolutely. Now, see, I asked that question for one, because my love of reading started again from me watching my father around the house. He worked a factory job, went to work 6 in the morning, came home around 4 in the afternoon. But by 5 o'clock or so, he was in his chair reading either Ebony or Jet or some book or something. He modeled that, and I picked up on that and was reading since I was very young as well. I have 4 daughters, and it's about a 50-50 split, or maybe a 25% split of which ones love to read or not. One of them has no problem, or 2 of them have no problem with reading, and 2 of them, like, literally, I hate reading.
Right.
Like, if you give them a book, they'll tell you, I'm not reading, I hate reading. So they didn't, all of them didn't pick up on that. But I work with children in school. I have an elementary school that I'm principal of, elementary and middle. I have grades 2 to 8. And Chandra, when I tell you one of the toughest sells is to get them to read It's a tough sell. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about, especially with all the technology that we have these days, because that's really what it is that competition between the video games and all the other technology, the Instagrams and Facebooks and all these other things that they have that's competing with a good old book. Talk a little bit how you get to that audience and spark that interest.
Well, and I agree with you. I do a lot of author visits, and that's one of the questions I ask all the time. Okay, how many of you like to read? And you'll see a few hands go up, and then you'll see others. How many, when you ask how many don't like to read, there are like twice as many hands that go up. And I'll say, well, tell me some of the reasons you don't like reading. And the number one reason I get is that books are boring.
Right.
So what I tell readers is I believe that all people would like to read. They just haven't found a book that they've fallen in love with yet. So some of the things I do, one of the things I do during my author visits is actually read an excerpt from my book. And there's something about doing that kind of engages the kids. And they're like, wait a minute, that's stuff that I actually deal with. Like that's how I do a lot of visits here in Birmingham. So some of the things I'll read will have a scene that actually takes place in Birmingham. So when they start recognizing, street names or locations, or they see experiences that they've gone through or that their friends are going through, that kind of hooks them. That's one thing. The thing that I tell parents, though, is, if you have a reluctant reader or somebody who's just like, you know what, you can keep that book, let me go find my video game. Reading takes different forms. You don't have to stick a book in a kid's hand. The goal is just to get them to read. If they're into video games, give them a book that has the codes to the video games in it. That still counts as reading.
Right.
Give them a comic book. Give them, if they're into cooking, give them a cookbook. One thing that I do with my daughter is when we're in the car, it's very rare that we listen to the radio. We're either listening to Spotify for music or I'm playing an audio book.
Right.
So, that is another way of engaging kids, especially now with the audio books, because they have all, the sound effects and all the music. It's like a musical production sometimes.
Correct.
So that's another way that you can engage readers. And honestly, that's how I get most of my reading done now, is by listening to audiobooks. And with that, I mean, I read, I'm saying read with quotation marks around it. I read about maybe 5 or 6 books a month just doing that.
Right.
And we're talking, these audiobooks are anywhere from 8 hours to 14 hours long. And they're oftentimes when I find myself, I'll get to the house and pull into the driveway, and I'm so engrossed in the book that I'll sit in the driveway until the end of the scene. So, I mean, there are just so many ways to engage, not just kids, but adults too.
Correct.
You just have to figure out what that person is interested in and hook them that way. If you have little kids who are into cartoons, they have so many books out now that are based on those actual cartoon characters. There's nothing wrong with getting one of those books and reading that to your child. Again, it's all reading. It all counts. There's nothing that says that you have to, get this 400-page book and force your child to read it. That's all that's going to do is turn them off.
Absolutely. And for the adults who are listening this morning, if you heard Chandra say just now, what we're talking about is not just for the kids. It's for the adults as well, because if you start doing your research, if you Google the number of books the average adult reads per year, you might be shocked. I mean, when you start getting numbers like 1 or 2 over a 12-month period of time, that an adult has only read about maybe 1.5 books or 3 books or what have you over a 12-month period of time. It's shocking because, and maybe it's not for those of you who don't read, but for those of us who are avid readers who get through, like Chandra just said, 5 or 6, 7 books a month, those numbers are very low. And especially when we're in a time now where everything that you do, at some point, you're going to have to read some type of instruction to get there. We're coming, as much as folks hate reading, we've become more and more reading and comprehension intensive, that if you don't have that skill and do it well, you're going to find yourself lost. The other point that Chandra just made, there are various ways that you can get your reading in. And with our technology these days, audiobooks, you're right, they're great, because I'll put an audiobook on in the car as well. Or either if I'm down I have a home office. If I'm down in my home office working on something, I'll put an audiobook on in the background while I'm working on it. So there are so many ways that you can get through books. And the listening audience know I share all the time. Just shared it last week as a matter of how I get through my books is I have over 200 plus books downloaded on my iPad on the Kindle app. And at any given time, I'm anywhere from 10, 15 to 20 books, because it lets you know the percentage you are through the book. But you just, whenever you have downtime or whenever you're waiting for something, you take the iPad with you and you open it up and you read a few pages. And believe it or not, you quickly get through books over time. So another good point that you brought up was, and this is key, parents, if you're trying to get your child to read, have them read something they are interested in, something that they like. Get them, and there's books written on everything from A to Z. Anything under the sun, you can rest assured a book has been written on it. So whatever the child or your interest in, go Google or other search engines, find who's written a book on it and read it. And Chandra, you brought some very good points in terms of if you know the child is interested in cooking or comic books or whatever, get them a book on that.
Right.
So,
and I'll say this too, Mark. All books are not for all readers.
Correct.
That's why there's so many books. So, I mean, if you start on one and you're like, oh, I absolutely hate this book, it's okay to put it down and move on to another one. I mean, and that's true even with audiobooks, because there have been so many books that I've started listening to, and there's either something about the reader's voice or something that just annoys me with the story, and I'll stop it. But that doesn't stop me from reading altogether. That doesn't mean I have to throw reading away. I just move on to the next book. That's
correct. And it's so funny you bring that up, and I'll tell you why, because I don't know what it is about books and reading, but for some reason, once you've either purchased a book or picked up a book, for some reason in our psyche, we feel obligated that we have to read it from beginning to end.
Right.
And you're right. There is no obligation for you to, if you don't like it, if you get through those first couple of chapters or first couple of paragraphs and it's not working for you, put it down and go find another one.
Right. And I think for me, because I worked for so many years as a book editor, I mean, that's something you learn. You had for most editors, you may have had the first paragraph to hook them. I mean, some of them might be more generous and give you a few pages, but that's where I kind of learned. Okay, let me cut my losses. This stuff is not pulling me in from the beginning, so I'm not. Right. I don't have hours to waste hoping that it gets better. If it doesn't grab me by the first few pages, then I'm moving on to something else, and it's okay.
Now, for those of you listening, if you're a writer, or if you have the ideal or the notion in your mind to write a book, listen to what Chandra just said. It's got a hook in the beginning. You got to grab that attention up front. Yeah. You can't wait till the middle of the book to figure out, I'm going to get them then. No, you have to get them up front. It is true. And I'm going to say again, for something, and the studies and research have shown, folks have this psychological guilt. Like, oh my God, I bought this book. I started it. I have to finish it. No, you don't. But at the same time, as she said, don't let that, you put the book down and then never read again. Like, no, that's not the objective either. You just move on to the next one. And there's so many ways out there for you to be able to do that. Now, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, because I'm looking at and you've worked with so many big names. And I remember when I was in corporate, I worked for probably at that time, one of the largest corporations in the world. So I kind of sort of know what it's like to be with a well-known brand name, but I mean, you've been with a few. What is it like to be a part of all these different, you're talking about Kimani, which was formerly BET. We all know BET, Good Housekeeping, New York Times. I mean, what is it like to be a part of that?
Honestly, Mark, when it was in the middle of it, really don't think about that. At least I didn't.
Right.
It was just, oh, okay, I'm going to work. And then kind of when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, I really worked for Good Housekeeping for 4.5 years. I think, I was just so focused on what I was supposed to be doing there that I didn't get caught up in, the name. And truthfully, I'm still the same way today. I mean, I don't get caught up in stuff like that. I mean, it's just, I've been blessed to do what I do, but it's not about the names for me.
Absolutely. Now, years ago, early on, the show used to be on Friday mornings. This show used to be on Friday mornings from 6 to 7:30. And a lot of times the local authors would come here live in the studio.
Oh, okay.
And whenever we'd finish the interview, because at that time I was teaching, I was in the classroom, I would ask, what are you doing after the interview? And they said, oh, no, I'm going to grab breakfast. I'm going to this, that, and the other. I said, do me a favor. Come with me to my school because I want my students to meet you. I was a language arts teacher. I said, I want my students to meet you. Where I'm going with the story is we'd have a copy of the author's book, and usually their picture's somewhere on the back or inside the front cover or whatever. And the kids, even though I'm sitting here saying, reading is a tough sell for some, but the kids would literally lose their minds to actually have the author live in front of them with their book, and they would look at the picture in the book and look at the author standing in front of them. They would lose their mind. I mean, the author was the rock star. Do you find that as you're going around working with kids, or when they see you live and your book is there?
I do, and it's really funny to me. It's interesting too because I'm actually extremely shy until you get to know me. So in writing books, I was always fine. I never thought about doing speaking or author visits when I dreamed of writing books. So now that's become a part of what I do. There was just something, I guess, in my spirit right after I released my first book, Spin It Like That, about going out to do school visits. And, the kids would get so excited. So now it's a very integral part of what I do. I make it a point to go and visit schools because I think it's very important that kids see someone who looks like them.
Yes.
Doing something that they may not have otherwise thought of doing.
Yes.
So I make it a point to go and do those visits and to just hang out with them and let them know, I'm a regular person like you are. I go in Walmart, when I go home, I'm going to cook dinner for my family. This writing books is what I do.
Right.
It's not who I am. It is a part of who I am, but it's not the totality of who I am. It's just one part of my life. And, you see me here. I came from Birmingham. I grew up in Birmingham. I attended public schools and, church and all this stuff. And if I did these things, you can do them too. Your
Absolutely.
only limits are you're your only limit.
For those of you in the audience, and I hope you've been with me since we began, even at 6 o'clock when I had the gospel music on, but certainly since 7 as my guest has been with us, it is Chandra Sparks Splond. She's an editor, a speaker, award-winning author, and blogger, and that's what we're talking about this morning. And again, the impetus for this show 18 years ago was to encourage reading, and that's what we're talking about this morning is the encouragement to do, and make it not, one thing I encourage, or I almost admonish, almost demand, I'm trying to look for the word I want to use when I'm working with my teachers, is not to use reading as a punishment. Because I don't want kids to associate reading with something negative. What we're trying to get across is reading should be fun, something pleasurable, something relaxing, something that you want to do. And that's what we're talking about this morning. How do you get to that point where, that's not something you hate, something you loathe, it's not a punishment, something that you want to do. Talk to me a little bit, Chandra, about where do your concepts come on? When you're talking about like Spin It Like That, where did you get your concepts from?
They really just come from everyday life. I'm a very, very big believer in doing books that are real and relevant, that readers can actually relate to their life. So I do topics that are of interest to kids. I do stuff about pursuing your dreams, which is the topic of Spin It Like That, as well as my book, Make It Work. And then I deal with issues, my Worth the Wait series, which includes the books The Pledge and The Promise, actually deal with teenage abstinence and the importance of loving yourself. The actual concept for that series, though, came about because I've always been fascinated by what I call the moment of impact. And it's basically when you meet someone who changes your life. And I started thinking one day, well, what happens if you meet someone and they don't change your life for the better? And from that, I started thinking about, this young girl who falls in love for the very first time, except her parents don't have a good relationship, so she doesn't know what a good relationship looks like. So she ends up in an abusive relationship, and, she's starting to question whether or not she should have sex with this boy. because she thinks she's in love with him. But the problem is she's part of her community's Worth the Wait club. So she's made this decision to wait until she's older, until she gets married to have sex. So, that kind of complicates things for her. So she's dealing with all these issues. And ultimately, the series is about the importance of loving yourself and the importance of loving others.
In your author visits, did you ever have a child that's read your book that came up to you and said, "Oh my God, you were talking about me. How'd you know?"
Yes, I do that all the time.
So, yeah, a lot of times as the authors go around, regardless of what genre they write in, as they visit people's like, wow, it seems like you had like a camera in my life or something, because that was me. Yeah. So again, oddly enough, you were talking about abstinence. You think reading is a hard sell. Abstinence is a hard sell, too.
Yeah, it is.
Especially in that age group. No, in that age group, it really is. So as you're going around, you got a chance to talk to children. They get a chance to meet you. And what do they question? Do they what are some of their questions? Because you're right in terms of, here's somebody standing in front of you that looks like you, and then you have the opportunity to actually talk with them. And do you get questions like along the lines of, how can I become that? Because I'm convinced, as I talk with kids, they really don't know what's out there. I mean, they hear the usuals, doctor, lawyer, so forth and so on. But there are so many careers out there. And then when someone stems before them who, does something in the creative field, like a writer, a musician, or whatever, what type of questions do you get?
I do get that. Well, how do you become an author? And that's not just from kids. That's from adults.
Right.
And, one of the things I tell them is, you don't have to go to college to be an author. I say that, but then I say, but I want you to go to college.
Right.
Although we know that college is not for everybody, there's always something you can do to further your education, whether that be trade school or community college, or there's so many different options available to you. So never stop learning. As far as writing the book, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, do you get writer's block? And what I tell people all the time is, writer's block is not an option for me. And the analogy that I give is, what happens for most people when they get up in the morning and they don't want to go to work or they don't want to go to school? For most people, they end up going anyway. So the same is true for me with writing books. Even on the days when I don't feel like it, or I feel like I don't have something to say, I have to put something on the page, because otherwise my daughter is not going to eat.
Right.
That's how I pay my bills. So, there have been many days when I sat down in front of the computer and I've literally found myself writing. I don't know what I'm going to say today. And there's something about just putting something on the page to kind of get stuff going. And one thing that people don't realize is, what you put on the page doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be put on the page and written. You can always go back and change it and make it better later. But there's nothing people can do with an idea that's just stuck in your head. So get something down on paper, then you can go back and revise it and make it better and take it from there.
Absolutely. Now, it even happened to me this morning as I was reading your bio. And your books are available out in them, or like in the local retailers or the big names like a Walmart or something like that?
You can get them online in Walmart. I've seen them on there. They're definitely available on Amazon.com. At this point, I'm self-publishing all of my books. So, they're definitely available on Amazon.
Well, where I'm going with the question is, even when I was reading your bio and I saw like Kimberla Lawson Roby, who's been on the show, and as I was playing around, saying I've been trying to get Jerome Dickey. Whenever I walk into a store, especially for someone who's been on the show, I get like a kid again. I remember a few years ago, because my mother lives in Georgia, And we had gone out to the local Walmart down there, and I started running across books of people who had been on the show. And I'm literally in the aisle. Mom, I've talked to that person. Mom, I know that person.
Yeah.
Mom, do you have that experience where you get your own work and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this came through me, or I know this person, or what have you? Because a lot of the music that's played in the background is my original creation. I released 2 jazz CDs, and I use them mainly for the background on the show. And I listen to things sometimes and say, I can't believe that came through me. Do you read some of your books and say, I don't even remember writing that?
Yes, I do that all the time. You know, for me, and I'm sure for most authors feel this way, seeing my name on the cover of a book never, ever gets old.
Right.
But it's a process. So now I'm going through the edits because I'll be releasing my 10th book probably in the next month or so. And I'm going through the edits now, and I remember posting on Facebook the other day, you know, just in case you think that the writing process gets easier over time, it doesn't. You know, I'm still nervous about this book being released because, I mean, we're human. I want people to like me. I want them to like what I've written. So, but as I'm going through doing the edits, I'm like, you know what? I don't even remember, like, writing scenes of this book. It's just, I mean, but again, that's just, and I think most people have that. Like when you really get into your zone,
right.
My brother is a pastor, and he's told me that. He'll say, you know, I'm in the middle of a sermon, and when I look up, it's over, and you've gotten into that zone,
right,
where it just kind of takes over, and you're just kind of along for the journey. And people kind of laugh when I tell them, you know, sometimes the characters end up doing things that I'm not expecting.
Right.
Or the story takes turns that I didn't expect. That's all a part of, you know, bringing the book to life. I'm surprised by it as much as the readers are at times.
And you know what? I'm glad you brought that, because I told you in the beginning that our conversation, or shall I say our interview, is very conversational. It's generally based on some of the responses that the guests give. And you just brought up one for me that I do generally tend to get to when I'm interviewing authors, and that's character development. And it's so interesting for the authors over the 18 years that I've interviewed. The character development piece is always so different from each one. And you just brought up one of the fascinating things for me, and that's whenever you see the character did something that I, as the writer, didn't even expect. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, how is your character? I mean, I've heard people say they eat with me, they sleep with me, they ride with me, they walk with me, they talk with me. How does character development come about for you?
Well, I mean, it really just kind of depends. The book that I'm writing on now, the one I told you that I'll be releasing in a few weeks, this is actually a book that I've been working on and off for the last 10 years. So for me, it started off as this girl who had this dream of becoming a model. I don't know where the thought came from, but I'm like, okay. So I developed this story with her becoming a model. And as the story developed, it became so much bigger than that. It actually became this girl who was running away from something that she had done. And as a result, she ends up getting this opportunity that opens doors for her. So ultimately, her biggest mistake ends up becoming her biggest blessing. And, you know, as far as the character is concerned, I kind of had an idea of what she looked like and where I wanted her to go. But some of the story ended up, you know, in places that I wasn't even expecting in terms of even her looks, because when the story opens, she actually is missing a tooth because of an accident. And when I first wrote that, I mean, that never occurred to me. And then I'm like, oh, you know, this is why it happened. So yeah, books definitely, my stories surprise me all the time. For me, I typically start out with like a general overview of like where I want the story to go, and I try and include like the bigger plot points, and then I just give the story room to kind of develop from there.
Well, I laugh as I hear the various authors talk about their character development, because I remember I had one author who said they actually had intended to kill the character off, and the character wouldn't let him. Mm-hmm. He couldn't kill the character off. The character wouldn't let him kill him off. That he had to now revamp and continue to rewrite because the character wouldn't allow him. I mean, they actually come to life and live and breathe.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's a good thing, because if it's happening for you as the author, it's going to do the same thing for the reader.
Right.
they're going to come to life. So what's next for Chandra? And you said you're getting ready to release your 10th book?
I am. My 10th book is called Shine, and it's about a 17-year-old girl, as I said, who ends up, her biggest mistake ends up becoming her biggest blessing. So her name is Nia Mitchell, so we're going to follow her on her journey, after she makes this big mistake. In addition to that, I also have my blog, as you mentioned, bookofsplond.com, where, 3 days a week at this point I'm publishing content related to help women get excited about faith, family, and fiction. So I interview a lot of authors, which I enjoy on Fridays. So I get to meet a lot of authors. In addition to those things, I'm also a book editor. So, I work with various authors to help them get their books ready for publication.
Well, we definitely going to have to stay in touch because, clearly you can see I interview authors. And so if you have anyone to pass this way, feel free, or let them know that my show exists and they want to be a guest on there. They're more than welcome to be on there. Like I said, for years now, I've been trying to get Jerome Dickey, and we always wind up trading tweets and this, that, and the other, and we've yet to make it happen.
I actually interviewed him last year. That was pretty fun.
Oh, I'm sure. So like I said, Kimberla has been on here 3 times. Omar Tyree has been on here 3 times because you all have open invites. Anytime you have a new project coming up. Matter of fact, whenever your latest one drops, if you want to come back, we can do that. They have open invites. They just send me an email, shoot me an email, let me know, I got something dropping. You mind if I come back on? Sure, not a problem. We just set the date.
Okay.
But feel free, if somebody wants to come on, just give them my email. Either email me, let me know, and we can make that happen. Birmingham, growing up in Birmingham, because like I said earlier in the beginning when I was introducing you, in terms of that being such a historic city, and I'm sure, or maybe I'm not so sure, but that you probably were after the whole thing that was going on with the bombings and all that kind of things. What is the city like now, or as you were growing up? Was that history always there? Is it still there? Or because as soon as I hear Birmingham, because I'm such a Martin Luther King fan, as soon as I hear Birmingham, I go right back to the Civil Rights Movement and Bull Connor and so forth and so on.
Right. I think the history was definitely here when I was growing up, but I think, like most kids, I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I think, looking back on it now, it's amazing. I did come along after the Civil Rights Movement. But right now, Birmingham is in an interesting place because we're going through a revitalization. We got a new mayor in. He's the youngest mayor in the city's recent history.
The African-American young man.
Yes, Randall Woodson.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's an alpha, if I remember correctly.
He is.
That's what I thought. Okay, yes.
Mm-hmm. And his chief of staff is as well. His chief of staff is actually my little brother.
All right now.
So that's my proud sister moment. But they're doing amazing things in the city. We just announced that we're about to get a football team. We're doing revitalizations downtown. So there's just so much amazing stuff going on. And, there have been a lot of celebrations in the last year or two for the Civil Rights Movement. I actually participated in an event in March with Jack and Jill of America where they did the Children's Crusade March.
Right.
Kind of recreated that. And they had families from all over the country come and participate in it. And it was just an amazing sight. We were in Railroad Park, which is one of the newer parks here in Birmingham, and I looked down the walkway, and all I saw was just a sea of families just walking. I can't remember where it started. I want to say they started at maybe 16th Street Baptist Church.
Okay.
But they just walked all the way, through Railroad Park, and it was an amazing experience. There was a foot soldier who participated, so my daughter got to take pictures with him, and she was actually doing a project at the time for school about the Civil Rights Movement. So for her to be able to kind of connect what she was learning in school with seeing this actually happen, that was actually pretty cool for her and for me too.
For me, because I do get a chance to travel relatively often, not as often as I used to when I was in corporate, but enough. I mean, it's interesting how you were saying it's amazing how an African-American female from Birmingham has been able to do all the things, and we both know that is God. There's no question in my mind that's God, because I say the same thing all the times in terms of me being an African-American male from Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson's like the third largest city in the state of New Jersey, predominantly urban. And people, it's kind of like in the Bible where people say, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Well, that same question is asked about Paterson. Can anything good come out of Paterson? So to be able to have the opportunities that I had, I know without a shadow of a doubt, it's been God. And I've had the opportunity to travel the world. And a lot of these places, historic places, I have the opportunity to go to. And Birmingham is not one of the cities yet, but it's on my list. This year, I'm supposed to be going to my wife's church. They're having their convention down in Nashville, Tennessee. So we're planning to go down there, and I'm making sure I get to Memphis while I'm down there. And so when I get to Alabama, I'm going to make sure I go to Birmingham, because whenever I come upon those sites, it's almost surreal. I mean, I could feel the spirit. I can feel the spiritual piece of it, of the people that were there and the events that occurred. So it's like whenever one of the first times I went to the Martin Luther King crypt, to the site down there at that church, and when I walked on that, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I walked out there to the grave site, and I got the strangest feeling inside of me in terms of it was like surreal. So when I go to these, when you say 16th Street Baptist Church, when you say all these different areas, I know for a fact when I step upon those grounds that I'm going to feel it. I'll feel the ancestors.
Yes, it's very amazing. And Birmingham is, we've recently been named one of the top food cities in the nation. So we have a lot of, new restaurants and stuff popping up. So there's just so much to do and to be a part of here.
That's exciting.
My family and I, we were actually making a list of things we wanted to do this summer, because I think part of living in a city is that you don't appreciate seeing it, I guess, from a tourist perspective. Right. So we were actually making a list of things that we wanted to try and do this summer to kind of take advantage of all that's being offered.
That's like I said, for me, those cities, because that time for me, the 60s, from like 60 to 70, that whole, especially 1968, that whole time frame for me is just fascinating. So as I said, to be able to visit those sites and places would be, I know, like surreal for me, without a doubt, because I just like, wow, this actually happened here. And you're right, for those that live there probably don't appreciate the same way that a tourist might. And that's all the more reason why it is so important of what you're doing in terms of having kids be able to see and connect. It is extremely important for kids, because you said something earlier that I meant to touch on too, and that was this whole notion of black people writing. There's still a lot of people who don't even believe black people read, let alone write. I mean, it was kind of like when you start getting into the various genres, they pigeonhole us into a genre. Well, they read, but they'll only read that. I mean, I think whenever the urban lit came out, when Terry Woods and Be More Careful or whatever it was called, I'm trying to think, it was... Right. When those True to the Game, that's it. I don't know why because I read that book, but True to the Game, absolutely right. When those books, that's whenever people started thinking black folks began to read. I said, that's not true. We were always reading, but we kind of get pigeonholed into that. But we write and read all genres, and kids need to understand and know that. Right.
Yeah, I think they, there are many publishers who are probably guilty of only supplying books, historical books, right? And I've seen, this biography of Rosa Parks from a kid's perspective. Some kids might be interested in that, but most of the ones I know aren't. And that's part of the reason for them that they see reading is boring. Right. Because it's stuff that they can't relate to. Right. So that's part of what I do. I actually do a series for younger kids. It's called my Date with Destiny series, where the main character is a 10-year-old girl who has a dream of getting out of foster care and, getting adopted and finding her forever family. And it's just a different perspective for kids to look for. I hadn't really seen a lot of stories about black kids in foster care. So I thought it was important to kind of tell that story. There's just so many, like, as you said, so many different genres. And I think that's another thing too. A lot of people who don't like to read, especially young kids, they don't realize that there are different genres that exist. So, if you don't like historical fiction, realistic fiction exists. There's just so much stuff. I'm listening to an audio book now about a shapeshifter. So there's just so much. So, again, you have to be open, and all books aren't going to be for all readers, but that's okay. Find what interests you.
That's correct. I laugh because when I was teaching 8th grade, we used to do one of the old classics, The Scarlet Letter. And that's a tough book to read. As a matter of fact, it's tough because it has the old language in it. And generally, you do that book in high school, but I would always do it in 8th grade to get my 8th graders prepared. And the beginning of that, talk about putting it down in the beginning. That's one that in the beginning you could easily put down. Because we were doing it in the classroom, they didn't have a choice. But once they figured out, once it became apparent that The Scarlet Letter was a baby mama drama, they couldn't put it down.
Right. Yeah. You have to give them something they can relate to. Yeah.
Yeah. Once they what? That was a pastor. That was a priest, and he had it. Wait a minute. This is getting pretty good. But yeah, once that connection is made, and once the children can relate, and adults, for that, I keep saying children, but this applies across the board. Because, we need more adults to continue reading as well. Because as I said, we are now in a time where everything is reading intensive, that I really, for folks who don't know how to read and can't read, I really, in all honesty, don't know how they function. Because, I use the example all the time of going up to an ATM. And I've been behind people who don't know how to read. And the ATM now spits more and more directions at us than even when it was first introduced. They give you a whole lot more options that you be able to have to read and say yes, no to, or what have you. Same thing now with our supermarkets and our convenience stores. A lot of them are going totally computerized, that you have to be able to, like self-service, and you have to read what that thing tells you to do and be able to do it. Otherwise, that machine would just sit there and look at you. So if you really don't have that concept or the ability to read, I really don't understand how folks function. And one of the best ways to get better at anything is to do more of it and do it well. And by reading books that you like, or that you're interested in, and things that you love, that's one way to learn how to read even better. One of the things I discovered with the kids that I serve, and it kind of dawned on me, and this is like near the end of the school year for us, but it kind of dawned on me why some of the kids tune us out, because they're not understanding a lot of the words that we're saying. And I'm talking basic words. Talking words like society and words like, so when I'm steady saying, kids, we're trying to get you ready to operate in the larger society. So they don't know what the word society means. So they're kind of like, what is he talking about?
Right. Yeah.
So those are vocabulary and everything else. It's all connected. So the more that you can read, and for the young people, because Chandra writes YA, as we call it, young adult, great place to start. So at this point in the interview, Chandra, what I do is I turn off the mic. I stop talking and I give the guest the opportunity to promote, shamelessly promote, unapologetically promote. The only thing is you can't say is a dollar amount, but anything in terms of reach, contact, where you're going to be, upcoming projects, so forth and so on. I shut the mic off and you have the opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Well, again, my name is Chandra Sparks Splond. I'm an author, blogger, editor, and speaker. And I would love it if you would check out my books. I write for middle grade, young adult, and the new adult market. And my most recent released book is actually called It's Like That. It's about a 26-year-old woman who is trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life after college. My next project for young adults will be released in the next few weeks. It's called Shine. And it's about a girl whose biggest mistake ends up becoming her biggest blessing. And then in addition to that, as I said, I'm a blogger, so feel free to follow my blog at bookofsplond.com. That's BOOKOF, S as in Sam, P as in Paul, L as in love, O, N as in Nancy, D as in dog.com, bookofsplond.com. Feel free to follow my blog where I talk about faith, family, and fiction. And I'm a book editor. So if you have a book project and you're interested in getting it published, I am happy to help you. I have almost 25 years of experience in book publishing at this point. So feel free to send me an email at S as in Sam, another S as in Sam, P as in Paul, L as in love, O, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, at gmail.com. That's cssplond@gmail.com. I'm happy to do a free sample edit on 5 pages of your manuscript so we can see if we're a good fit to work together. And that's what I have coming up. So I appreciate this opportunity, Mark. I've really enjoyed talking with you this morning.
Well, same here. And I said we will be in touch, especially from the standpoint of connecting various authors. You know, again, if I hear of any, I'll send them your way, or if you hear any, feel free to send them my way, recommend them, we'll get them on the calendar. But I've enjoyed the conversation as well on so many different levels for so many different reasons, because there's a lot of meaning in there. So the show is recorded. Whenever I get done editing, I will send you a copy of the link, and you can do whatever you'd like with it. I do the archives on my YouTube channel, so folks who did not rise early with us, they have the opportunity to go back and they can hear the interview again on my YouTube channel. But again, I appreciate what you do, love what you do in terms of encouraging the love of reading. We really, and especially people who look like us, people of color, African-American descent, or again, people of color, we really have to jump on that reading bandwagon to be informed. Yeah. Because if there's ever time that we need to be informed, to be able to articulate and to critically think, it's now. And the reading plays a major part in that. So, all right, we have come to the end of our time together for this interview. Again, we always have an open invite. Just as a matter of email, let me know whenever you'd like to come back on, and we'll get your schedule.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, with that being said, have a wonderfully blessed Saturday and week and life and everything else. And like you said, we know it's God. So,
yes, and thank you.
All right, all right. Take care now.
All right. Bye.
Bye now. Well, that brings us to the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to go back to putting on the good news in song. That was the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. My guest was Chandra Sparks Splond.